Hi everyone and welcome to the Dodo Bird Nerd. It's me, the Dodo Bird Nerd. In today's Magic video, I'm going to be doing a deck tech on one of the new commanders from Kaldheim, that being Sarulf, Realm Eater. So, without any further ado, let's roll the intro and let's get started. So, before we get started with the cards we're going to be putting in the deck, I should probably say what the commander itself does. So, Sarulf Realm Eater is 1, a black and a green for a 3/3 legendary creature wolf. Whenever a permanent an opponent controls is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on Sarulf Realm Eater. And at the beginning of your upkeep, if Sarulf has 1 or more +1/+1 counters on it, you may remove all of them. If you do, exile each other non-land permanent with converted mana cost less than or equal to the number of counters removed this way. So, in this deck, we're really only going to be taking advantage of that first ability. The second ability is nice, but it's not really going to be what we're going to try to use here. If we need to use it, we can, but the deck's not built to take advantage of it. What this deck is, however, is a Voltron deck, built around getting Sarulf as big as possible, and then, using commander damage to take out opponents after he's gone absolutely massive. So, our first category is, removing permanents. While there's obviously other cards that I'm not going to mention, stuff like Putrefy or Beast Within, these are specific ways to remove permanents that I thought I would mention for this video. Now, the first set is Archfiend of Depravity, Custodi Lich, and Demon's Disciple. Archfiend of Depravity basically can wipe their boards down to 2 creatures, which can make Sarulf, again, quite large, due to the massive creature loss that the Archfiend will likely do. Custodi Lich introduces the Monarch to the game, which is never a bad thing, and whenever you become the Monarch, target player is going to sacrifice a creature. Now, while maybe not as effective as a few of the other ways to get rid of creatures in this deck, it does introduce the Monarch into the game, so it is still a fairly good card. Demon's Disciple is another one of those Fleshbag Marauder effects, however it can also hit Planeswalkers, which can help against Super Friends, as well as somewhat giving us a better shot of getting a guaranteed trigger, which this can effectively give at least 3 counters onto Sarulf whenever he enters the battlefield, which is pretty good, assuming everyone has a creature or Planeswalker. Then we have Elvish Dreadlord, and when it dies, it's going to nuke all non-elf creatures with -3/-3, and Encore can get that up to a -9/-9. Now, while Sarulf is not an elf himself, as long as he's large enough, he isn't going to die to the Elvish Dreadlord. That's basically 1 counter, assuming Elvish Dreadlord only has 1, and he will need at least 7 counters in order to survive 3 of them. However, you can stack your triggers so that Sarulf will get bigger between each one going off, so he could potentially survive an Encore. Gilt-Leaf Winnower is a creature that can kill a creature when it enters, which is a fairly good thing in this deck, as we need creatures, and it kills one when it enters the battlefield. Hunter of Eyeblights is a repeatable way to kill creatures with counters on them, which show up fairly often in Commander. So, again, very good removal spell on a body. Massacre Girl is another way, similar to Elvish Dreadlord, to get Sarulf large. As long as he's big enough, Massacre Girl can effectively wipe the board of any other creatures, getting Sarulf absolutely massive, and then as there's effectively an empty board, he can probably be able to commander damage someone out, assuming it's late enough in the game to do that. So Massacre Girl is a really good card in this deck. Reclamation Sage can blow up an artifact or enchantment, another way to hit permanents, because Sarulf is permanent, not just creature. So, again, it's on a body. And Tetzimoc Primal Death can basically be a one-sided board wipe as long as you play it correctly, which, again, is very good in Sarulf, as he'll get absolutely massive and then likely be able to kill somebody if you use Tetzimoc correctly. And then we have Vona's Hunger, which can effectively be another one-sided board wipe, though a pseudo board wipe, as they have to sacrifice half their creatures. Sacrificing is a bit important in this deck, as one of our payoffs really likes when they're sacrificed. However, it'll still do the same thing as a destroy, effectively getting Sarulf even bigger, and it hits a lot of creatures. Casualties of War can give Sarulf up to 5 counters, as he will count all of them. Now, you're probably not going to use the land one that often, and it's completely optional as land destruction isn't normally that, liked in Commander. However, it is an option in case there's something like a Gaia's Cradle out there. And Decree of Pain, while yes, it will kill Sarulf most of the time, there is ways to give Indestructible in this deck, and you could always cycle it and wipe out a bunch of smaller creatures to get Sarulf big. Then we have Azuri's Predation, which again is another one-sided board wipe that can also potentially give us a board of 4/4s to help us win the game, in addition to Sarulf's commander damage, which is pretty good. Gaze of Granite, again, will likely hit Sarulf as long as it's for 3 or greater. However, there are ways to give Indestructible, so it is a way we can get around it. And in Garruk's Wake is a one-sided board wipe that also hits Planeswalkers in addition to creatures, so Sarulf will get massive off of an in Garruk's Wake. Mire and Misery can force sacrifice of a creature or enchantment, another way similar to Demon's Disciple, to hit, almost guaranteedly hit at least one thing on each opponent, giving Sarulf 3 counters for only 2 mana. Plague Wind is another one-sided board wipe. This one doesn't hit Planeswalkers, unlike in Garruk's Wake, so it's less good, but still a good card to run in the deck. And then Garruk Cursed Huntsman can destroy creatures as a minus ability, as well as make more wolves, which there is one wolf tribal, one wolf tribal card in here, so they will get bigger off of that, but it's mainly for the -3, but the 0 can be helpful. It also gives trample, which is fairly good. It's basically doing what this deck wants to do. Our next category is going to be removal payoffs. We do have a few of them other than Sarulf himself. The first of these is Poison Tip Archer, basically making whenever a creature dies, as most of our removal is creature-based, they will lose 1 life. So if we can't go for commander damage, we can maybe go for regular damage. Tergrid, God of Fright, is the card I was mentioning earlier that likes sacrificing, as we would gain their entire board if we use a sacrifice ability like Vona's Hunger or Archfiend of Depravity. Tergrid's Lantern could also potentially be used, as they can sacrifice non-land permanents, though more likely than not they'd go for the discard card or the losing 3 life over making Sarulf larger, though it is an option if you need it. And Liability, while it can hurt us, also hurts our opponents whenever one of their creatures dies. Actually, not even just creature, it's whenever a card of theirs goes into the graveyard. Again, it does hurt us, however, we will likely be able to take more advantage of it, hurting our opponents more. Then, we have to find ways to pump Sarulf even further, as there are ways to make him even larger than his normal triggers would get him. For example, this would be Evolution Sage. Landfall Proliferate can make his counters even bigger. Reyhan, Lost of the Abzan, if Sarulf will be removed, can move into something else. Then when we can recast Sarulf, she can then move them from that creature back onto Sarulf, assuming the creature they were moved onto dies. So it's a very good card here. Then Blade of the Bloodchief effectively can give another Sarulf effect. It only works on creatures and not just enchantments or any other permanent, but it still does most of what we want to do in the deck. We also have Branching Evolution, which can double Sarulf's counters, which is fairly good, given the fact we're putting a lot of counters on him. Eternal Thirst gives Sarulf lifelink, which is pretty good, and also puts more counters on him. Again, similar to Blade of the Bloodchief, a mini little Sarulf ability. And then Hydra's Growth doubles his counters on each upkeep, so that can get out of control really, really quickly. And our final ways to pump Sarulf further are Predatory Hunger, so playing creatures will also put counters on Sarulf, in addition to them dying, which is fairly good, make him even larger. And then Arlinn just puts counters onto wolves when they enter, and Sarulf is a wolf, and as well as making wolf tokens, giving us more bodies, as well as just more wolves, for a card we'll get to a bit later. Then our next few categories are all going to be granting certain abilities to Sarulf, and then if any of them give multiple, they'll be at the end. Just to, I guess, go over the grab bag all at once, but go over the specific ones earlier on. So the first one is going to be Trample. For that we have Brawn, Creeperhulk, and Tuskguard Captain, as well as a few others we'll get to in a second. Now, Brawn, again, it just gives Trample as long as it's in a bin, and it'll be Control Forest. As it's a green deck, we will definitely have a forest or two. And it can give Trample, and it's fairly hard to remove unless they can exile our graveyard. Creeperhulk is a repeatable 1 in a green to give Sarulf 5, make Sarulf a 5/5, which can help him survive some of our more --/ base board wipes, as well as gives him Trample, which is fairly good rate. It also has Trample itself. And Tuskguard Captain gives all of our creatures that counters Trample, and Sarulf will more likely than not have a counter on him, so it'll effectively just give him trample. Howlpack Resurgence is the card I was mentioning earlier with the other wolf tribal effects, as it'll give them all trample, allowing us to do even more damage, but mainly it's here to give Sarulf trample. And Prodigious Growth is just here to make Sarulf even larger, giving him +7/+7, as well as trample, which is one of the better keywords we can give him in the deck. The next keyword is going to be Death Touch. So in this category, we have Archetype of Finality, Fynn the Fangbearer, and the Binding of the Old Gods. Archetype of Finality just gives all of our stuff Death Touch and also prevents our opponents from having Death Touch, which is fairly good. Now, while Fynn doesn't necessarily give Death Touch, he does synergize very well if Sarulf has Death Touch, potentially allowing us to go for another route to victory if commander damage isn't going to work. 10 damage is significant, not 10, just 5 hits is better than getting 21 damage sometimes, and so Fynn is definitely an option. Ohran Frostfang will give Sarulf Death Touch whenever he attacks, as well as allowing him to draw cards whenever he hits, and as he might have trample, that is fairly good. Binding of the Old Gods is very good in this deck. Its first one will guaranteedly pump Sarulf by destroying a non-land permanent. Its second one will get us a forest card, which is fairly good for ramp, and the third one will give him Death Touch until end of turn, so overall, Binding of the Old Gods is a very good card in the deck. Our next thing is Granting Indestructible. Now, outside of in the grab bag category, we only have one card here, that being Daring Fiendbonder, and once it dies, it can give Sarulf a indestructible counter, which is often really hard to remove, because the only way at that point would be to exile Sarulf, bounce him, or find a way to remove the counter, which isn't that common. You could also put Sarulf into the library. So it's a fairly good way to make sure Sarulf has indestructible for more of our destroy-based board wipes that might affect him, such as Decree of Pain or Gaze of Granite. Our next keyword, I guess you could say, would be Forcing Blocks. Again, we only have one in this category, which is Lure. Now, if we do this correctly with something like Death Touch and Trample, we can get Sarulf to be absolutely massive by and effectively wipe one player's board, because while he won't get any counters until after the creatures die, as long as he's big enough, he'll effectively wipe their board and then get massive off of a Lure. Assuming, the creatures actually are able to block, because they might be tapped or can't block. But Sarulf will be able to get rid of most of them using a Lure. And our final category is going to be granting several keywords, as I mentioned prior. The first set is Falthis Shadowcat Familiar, which can give Sarulf Menace and Death Touch, two very good keywords here. Haunted Cloak gives Sarulf Vigilance, Trample, and Haste, again, all keywords we want to see. And Lockset on Warhammer can give him Trample and Lifelink. Again, these are all cards that we want to see in the deck, as Sarulf getting keywords is oftentimes better for us. The last few ways for us to do that would be Sword of Vengeance, which gives him First Strike, Vigilance, Trample, and Haste. Again, a bunch of keywords that we really want to see. Gift of Doom is another way to give Sarulf Indestructible as well as Death Touch, and we can oftentimes cast it for much less than that 4 and a black, as we can just sacrifice a creature after morphing it. And then Gift of the Deity is another way for us to have a Lure effect, as well as giving him Death Touch, as he is both black and green, so he'll get +2/+2, a Lure, and Death Touch, which is fairly good, especially if we have a Trample granting effect. So those are the main cards I wanted to bring up for my Sarulf Realm Eater Commander deck. Now, I have yet to test this deck out, as Kaldheim hasn't come out yet, so this deck list is subject to change. However, I think overall it is a very good Sarulf the Realm Eater deck. So any other cards that I will list in my deck list will all be in the description below. Stuff like lands, ramp, and other removal will all be in the description. So, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe, and I will see you all next time. Bye!